joining me now, for real this time, the busiest man this time of year in the NBA. He has all the draft intel you could possibly want or need. My favorite annual tradition, Bleacher Report's Jonathan Wasserman.
How are we doing, Jay?
Hello,
Mac?
Jonathan.
Everything good?
Yes, I think we're good now. Thanks to my Wi-Fi, apparently finally starting to cooperate. So we just talked about it a little bit before we started recording. So I'll say this to start. You hear so much stuff over the, I think, weeks and months leading up to draft day. You're at the point, I'm at the point where we just want to get this thing done. How much of what you're hearing right now do you feel like is misinformation? How much do you feel like is like, okay, this can actually help me figure out where someone's going to go? And how do you personally differentiate between those two things?
Yeah, you just have to use your judgment, over the years on what's nonsense and what's legitimate, and how the cycle works. Like, you knew Cade Cunningham would start out as the favorite to go number one. You knew eventually there'd be a rumor about Jalen Green and Evan Mobley getting consideration. And then you knew part of the cycle would be, well, now they're looking to listen to offers for the number one pick, and it's all going to cycle back to they're going to take Cade Cunningham. And that's kind of how it, how it works with every team. They're targeting this guy. They're looking for a guy who could help them win now. It's the same shit every year. And, and you just kind of have to use your judgment on what you buy and some of the sources that you're listening to and who you trust over the years. And again, it really comes down to judgment.
Okay. There's a lot of players. I feel like and you've written about this, obviously, the Knicks have one of the wider ranges in terms of players that I think most fans are focused on, because not only do they have the two picks in the 19, 21 and 32, but there's also this notion that they may try to trade up. And then I feel like there's this other notion that outside of what used to be a top five and now is maybe a top six or maybe a top seven, we'll get into it in a sec, they could get up into that next, range of guys. So I feel like, there's like 20 guys that in my head, I'm like, oh, well, maybe it could be this player or that player. With that being said, and I want to kind of go down your mock draft from the other day, which everybody could find on Bleacher Report. It's awesome stuff as always. You have Book Night, Mr. Book Night from Connecticut, now at 6. That feels like too high for any, like, even if the Knicks were going to throw in 19, 21, and let's just say like the 23 Dallas pick, right? They're not getting up to Book Night range, right?
No, they're not. And I'll tell you right now, I got a text last night from a team. I can confirm the Knicks are trying to trade up. They've made calls already. I don't think I'm allowed to say who they called, but it's late lottery, that range.
Okay.
And they're and I don't know details of what they offered, but they're making calls to try and get up into that range. We could talk, go back and forth about who they're targeting. 6 is too high. They're not going to be able to get there unless they throw in something unexpected, not just the picks in this draft. I mean, that's just an assumption. You never know. It really depends on like how Oklahoma City values Book Night. Do they love Book Night and see a star, or do they really not see much of a difference between 6 and 19 or whatever? But the Knicks are trying to trade up, but 6 I would think is too high for them.
The next team that I kind of have always circled as at least an outside possibility is Orlando at 8, purely because they seem like the one team in the league next year, maybe in addition to Oklahoma City, maybe Houston, although Houston's name popped up in the Dame trade rumors recently, so who the hell knows. But like Orlando seems content to just, run a bunch of kids out there next year and let the chips fall where they may. Yeah. I would think if they could pick up a significant future asset, again, maybe a future first, plus take an extra couple bites at the apple. Do you see that as being a range that the Knicks would be able to go up and get to?
Again, it really comes down to who Orlando values. Like if Kuminga, and again, none of these trades will happen until Orlando is on the clock, until they see who's available. Like if Orlando thinks, and in my latest mock draft, I have Kuminga going 8. Yeah. If they think like, well, we love Kuminga as a, maybe the 6th best prospect, we can get him at 8, and we're certainly not trading. But if their targets are off the board by 8, then they can reconsider and listen to some offers.
You mentioned Kuminga. I think you've mentioned it in the past about how there's a world where he could emerge as the best player from this draft. There's also a world where he could emerge as like a guy that the troubling signs that we saw in the bubble towards the end are, come to fruition. I feel like generally when a guy like this starts to slide, it's not a great sign. What's your read on Kuminga right now?
So some of the intel I've gotten, or some of the background checks scouts have done, hasn't been super assuring. There's been questions about his professionalism, how seriously he takes everything. There's nothing about his character or anything. Good, nice kid. But I think there are questions about whether he will be a player who maximizes his potential. Whether does he understand how to play winning basketball, even though he talks about it. Does he actually know how to do it? And then, you go back and watch the film and he doesn't really, he's got tons of scoring potential, but if he does not reach that scoring potential, he's a bust. Like he's got such little margin for error because he's not a passer. He's not an impact defender. And so he's got to reach this scoring potential. And having said that, he shot 24% from three and 62% from the line. So he's got a long ways to go to get to that scoring potential. And anybody that drafts him knows it's going to take a couple years for him to not just get there with his shot, but also figure out how to score within the flow of an offense. Because some of the criticism dating back to high school, he's a catch and hold guy. And he's, let me figure out which move I'm going to make while the four other guys stand around. And he takes some bad shots and doesn't always use his impressive physical profile to his advantage. And he plays more like a two guard instead of like a power forward sometimes. But of course, with his perimeter skill set and his body, there is mismatch potential and obvious upside. But again, I think scouts are a little bit hesitant to buy into him actually reaching it.
That makes a lot of sense. He's just honestly, I had not thought of him as a name until reading your mock draft on Bleacher Report the other day and being like, wow, I wonder if the Knicks would ever try to make a swing for the fences with him. Which leads me to my next question. So we talked about Book Night. We talked about obviously Kuminga. It feels like, you always see Wagner. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay. Wagner up there towards the second half of the top 10. You see Moody. Obviously, Barnes has now kind of nudged himself into that top of the draft conversation. Is there in your mind a clear drop off after like a certain tier that kind of is in the back half of the top 10, or is it more fluid for you?
It's pretty fluid. I mean, there really is. I think this year there's that first group with Cade, Mobley, Green, Suggs, and I guess you could say Barnes is in that group. I think he is for me. And then after that, the difference between 6 and I don't know what to put a number on it, but 6 and in the mid first round is pretty similar to me. And I don't think that whoever goes 6 is going to be the 6th best player in this draft. I mean, it's going to be guys you can get at 14 and 15. I think that's a good value. I almost rather have, I'm hesitant for the Knicks to trade up because I think I'd rather take 2 swings at 19 and 21 than trade up to, 10 or 11 and saying, put all your eggs in one basket there.
So I want to pick that apart for a second because I don't know. You know me by now. I always try to talk myself into positive outcomes in the future for the Knicks. And I look at these playoffs and I look at, okay, you got the best player on this team was the 13th pick. This team was the 15th pick. This team was the 10th pick, and you go down the line. And I don't want to say it seems like teams are getting worse at this, but you laugh. Do you get where I'm why is it that we could look through the league and you get all these players who were essentially picked in the teens or maybe the back half of the lottery or whatever, they're blowing up and yet the hit rate on your true stars coming from the top 5 every year, it's you get 1, 1.5, 2. What do you think that is? So my theory is, and I don't know if we're getting worse, we're just not getting better. That's fair.
This shit is hard. It's not just picking the talent. Everyone can identify strengths and weaknesses. It's who is going to get better in 3 years? And so, but then I think, again, back to my theory, I think the more information, there's so much information out there, and scouts now, their job description is not just evaluating talent, but they have to become detectives. And they put so much stock into character checks and background checks And sometimes I talk to scouts and they're like, yeah, I really messed up on him. I put way too much stock into like conversations with his friends and former teammates and former coaches. And again, I think sometimes there's just too much information, not just with background checks, but stats. There's just like so much out there. Sometimes I think if we just simplify it and just watch them play a little bit and ignore the numbers and stop getting so deep with your background checks and nitpicking everything they've done since they were 13 years old. I don't know. That's just part of my theory, but your job is to go out and gather information. I think sometimes there's just too much and it kind of clouds our judgment of the basketball evaluation.
Well, to that point, speaking of detective work, we have now a 1-year sample size of what a Leon Rose type of player might be. Looking at Obi and Quickly this year, I don't know that they have much in common as players, but there seemed to be, and I'm sure you saw all their interviews, there seemed to be almost like a contagious positivity emitting from both of those guys. More like it was noticeable to me, at least. Like, again, watching their interviews, seeing how their teammates responded to them. Well, let me ask this in two parts. First of all, does that check out for you in terms of just like, was that your part of your evaluation, or that part of what you were hearing before last year's draft? And do you think that there's anybody in this year's draft that kind of fits in, maybe not that same mold, but has some of those similar qualities?
I'll say this. The scouts I've talked to are always like, great kids, great group this year. And honestly, I feel like I've heard that over the past couple of years, more so in the recent couple drafts, that just really high character kids. And it's like we're teaching them at an early age that they're looking for good people, as if like this is like a real company, and nobody's going to hire somebody if they don't like them, even if they're good workers. And so I think the NBA is helped put more of an emphasis on being professionals and teaching them early. Going back to Obi and Quickly, clearly I would imagine, based on the Knicks history, that they're putting an emphasis on character. They want high character guys. They're not going to take a chance on a guy like Jaden Johnson. I'm not saying he's not a high character guy, but he's got a lot of red flags in his background. So I'm sure that's part of their search process. I think when we look back at last year's draft, they looked at Obi, and I'm sure, like others, they obviously he's a great kid. I mean, such a positive guy and likable. I think they saw star potential with him. Okay. And yeah, he was the national player of the year. He led the country in dunks. He's a ridiculous athlete, and he was shooting threes, and like, it's easy to detect star potential, particularly at number 8 overall. It was, I totally understood why they made the pick. I probably would have made the same pick at the same time. Okay. And with Quickly, honestly, I didn't know Quickly that well on the personal level before the draft. Obviously, I'd covered him since high school, but I guess I hadn't seen a ton of interviews with him. And having now got to know him pretty well over the past year, just by watching the Knicks, he clearly has, he is clearly there. Like, he's a smart guy. He gets it. He's a worker. We saw we read all that stuff about him trying to learn from Durant at USA camp. Yep. Like, he gets it. Like, he's a smart kid who's grounded and self-aware, and all those qualities, I'm sure, played a role in that pick.
Okay. So I know you said everybody in this year's draft is, they seem like good kids, right? Davion Mitchell is the guy that, if you ask me to wager, let's wager $1 right now on who the Knicks are might be targeting if they trade up. You'd think, because of the boxes he allegedly checks, older player, ready to come in, defense, some shot creation on the outside, and then you read things that seems like a great teammate, hard worker, made himself into this level of prospect. Yep. You have echoed a lot of the same fears that I have about Mitchell in your writing and analysis in the past, which is that, he's 23 years old, right? 20, or is he?
Well, he'll be 23 before the season.
He'll be 23 before the draft. How do you think teams are looking at him? Do you think like he is a candidate to slide? Like, where are you at on Davion?
Yeah, this is the best part about the evaluation process. You can talk to two scouts, and they both have totally different viewpoints. One of them doesn't give a shit about his age, and the other one's like, he's 6 foot tall.
Do some scouts really just not give a shit about his age?
I think in recent years they've kind of worried about it less, especially like Cam Johnson going out and being a key part of a Phoenix Suns team when you win 11 overall, and they got a lot of shit for that pick, but and they're doing the same thing with Kispert and Duarte, and they're like some of these GMs who have pressure on them, they just want guys who can come in and contribute to their rotation on a rookie contract. Okay. And so, and when I'd say when the top 5 pick, you don't want a 23-year-old, but when you get to like the late lottery range, you're not getting a star. So if there's a high likelihood, a guy can come in and make an impact, if he's 23, 22 years old, no big deal for them. So with Mitchell, again, I think we all know the pros and cons of Mitchell at this point. And yeah, he on paper, he checks the boxes of somebody that the Knicks would target.
You said you're not getting a star at that point. I mean, obviously, if you thought someone could be a star at that point in the draft, I would imagine you would probably have them higher on your list. I think I ask you this question every year, and it's never a fair question, so I'm going to ask it again. If there's someone you think you're going to look back on, or we're going to look back on, and we're all going to be wrong about, like how the fuck did this guy not go in the top 5 of this draft? Do you like? I know it's again unfair question. Who do you think that might be?
Man, I think and it's a funny my answer. I'm not going to say top 5, but maybe I'll say like top 10. He's not going to go top 10. But Cam Thomas from LSU,
fuck yeah,
makes me he keeps me up at night. He keeps me up at night, and for 75% of the season, I hated watching this kid play, and I still don't love watching him play. He has one of the craziest shot selections you've ever seen. He looks like he has no interest in passing to anybody. He's disinterested on defense. I was watching a possession the other day where he took a fadeaway 2-pointer with 26 seconds left on the shot clock. Like, he does not give a shit about team basketball, about what he's supposed to do, but he's so good at making shots, and it's a shot making league. And if he goes to a team where he's got veterans around him and they kind of naturally control his shot selection and they get on him and they don't let him pull some of the shit he pulled at LSU, and he's got a coach who's on him and he really locks in, like this guy could be an incredible scorer. He was all-time leading scorer at Oak Hill. He averaged 23 a game as a freshman. The 5 major conference freshmen to ever do that were Durant, Trae Young, Markelle Fultz, and Michael Beasley. And so he's just got a special ability to put the ball in the basket. And he makes you scratch your head, and he could be a turnoff to a lot of people, and that's why he's going to slip. But if he goes to a right team with the right fit, I mean, relatively speaking, I don't think he's going to go in the lottery. I think he's 15 to 25.
Okay. A guy that had a little bit more, no, actually I shouldn't say that. Let me rephrase that. There was another freshman this season to average 20 points a game. Again, not many major conference freshmen have done that, and his name is Sharife Cooper. Yeah. I was starting to say he had a little bit of trouble putting the ball in the basket because his 3-point shot is, let's just politely say, not what you would have wanted last year. Do you think, again, I'm asking you to generalize here, a GM would rather take a guy with special skills, which Cooper clearly has, and you've written about them a lot, and try to teach him how to shoot, or do you think they'd rather take a guy like, let's say, a Duarte, who he could do everything pretty darn well, but there's not that ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, it's eye of the beholder and the team, and like a rebuilding team is probably not going to want to take a chance, not going to want to go with Duarte, but a rebuilding team. I mean, yeah, but a rebuilding team may want Cooper, who's got some star qualities to him. And they'll have time for a shot to hopefully improve. The thing with Cooper and tying him to the Knicks, and obviously he's been a big conversation in Knicks world for this draft. If he was up to me and the Knicks stuck at 19 and 21, I'd want him with one of my 2 picks. Okay. And yeah, I know all of his flaws, but again, I think we have to put things in perspective. You're not getting a star player at 19 and 21. And if you remember that, then it's okay to draft Sharife Cooper as a change of pace guy off the bench. Lower the bar a little bit. Remember where you're drafting. And Cooper could hold a lot of value to the Knicks in a 15, 20-minute role, just coming off the bench, putting pressure on defenses, setting up teammates. And you say to Cooper, get me 10 assists. I don't care if you score once. Just set the table for everybody else. Hold your own defensively. By the way, I think he's better defensively than his reputation suggests. Okay. And, as long as, and then maybe if he becomes a great starting point guard, obviously that would be amazing. But at 19 and 21, you're looking for rotation players. You're looking for contributors to your 8 to 9 man rotation. And I think Cooper could be that guy. And so I think if you just lower the bar a little bit and remember where you're picking, I think Cooper could hold value to this particular team.
You had a great tweet the other day saying don't take green room invites as the be all end all. That said, I was a little surprised not to see Cooper's name on the 20-man list. Were you a bit surprised by that? I
sent a text to a scout the other day and I said, what's going on with Cooper and Mann? I was shocked to see both of them. And he said,
Mann also.
He said, I was not shocked that Cooper wasn't. I was shocked that Mann wasn't invited.
Really?
So I think there's a lot of like Cooper is divisive. Like you could see star qualities with him, or you could want no part of a 6-foot guard who turns the ball over, has this reputation for not being a good defender, and obviously is not a good shooter. So, I mean, I could definitely see why a team would want nothing to do with him. He's not interchangeable. He's not going to be able to guard twos. You can't play him off the ball. Like if you're going to draft Cooper, he needs the ball.
Yeah. And
if he has the ball, a lot could go right, but a lot could go wrong. And so I could see a lot of teams having zero interest in Cooper. But yeah, Mann is a little more interchangeable, and with his shot, I think some teams might find him more attractive.
I was about to say, you just mentioned, I don't know if I would say my favorite player that I want, because I don't have a favorite player that I really want the Knicks to draft, but Mann is a guy who every year I feel like I see tape of one guy and I'm like, why is this player not being talked about higher? Mm-hmm. So I will ask you that question. Why is Mann not being talked about higher given all the stuff that he could clearly do?
So Mann is like definitely an on-ball guy. He's got to have the ball in his hands, and he's just not a great playmaker in terms of his playmaking IQ. And so that's fine. I mean, that doesn't mean he's going to be a bust or anything. You just have to, again, his role is not starting point guard. His role is probably like what Quickly's role is.
Okay.
Which is, give me instant offense, streak scoring, a guy who can create for himself, but you don't want him on the ball for 30 minutes making decisions. He just doesn't have the vision and that point guard instinct to balance scoring with playmaking and see everyone around him and know when to attack versus balancing it with passing. But yeah, there's no doubt he can create for himself. I got to see him in a private workout in Chicago, and he was just drilling logo jumper after logo jumper and smooth as could be. He had one of the best floaters in the draft. And so I think similar to Quickly, between his float game and his pull-up game, that's how he's going to make money, and that's how he's going to hold value in the league. But I don't see him as like your lead starting point guard for 30 minutes a game.
Okay. I always wonder with guys like that, like is it possible to just teach someone how to be a proficient pick and roll passer? Am I oversimplifying it though?
No. And he was graded in the 86th percentile and as a pick and roll player this year. I think it's more of just over 30 minutes. Can he do it? Can he really balance it out? Okay. And can he, a lot of his, you could see when he goes into self-creation mode, it's always looking to score. And sometimes guys like that just have that mentality, like Kobe White. Reminds me like Kobe White. Okay. Kobe White can put you up an 8-assist game every now and then, but over an 82-game season playing 30 minutes, he's not going to do it all the time because he knows that he's better at looking for his shot and shooting off the dribble, and that's just what pops into his brain first.
Okay. A couple more. You've been great already, and I don't want to keep you for too long, but I have to make the most of these minutes. I feel like have been high this year on Kai Jones out of Texas. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, also I'd say I'm moving him down my board, and again, I think he's team dependent, and where you are with your rebuild and how patient you are should depend on your level of interest in him. And I mean, he was like 5th in the country in dunks, and he didn't play too many minutes. Yeah. Didn't see too many touches. He just knows how to put himself in position to get easy baskets, and I like that. And I also buy his defensive versatility, kind of like Jonathan Isaac. The numbers did not add up. Like he did not block many shots. He didn't get many steals, and he didn't make many threes. With Kai Jones, it's like you hope that the highlights become regular occurrences. However, his highlight tape was short. Like he didn't do it often. But when he did it, you're like, whoa, how is this kid not a top 10 pick? But it was only every couple of games where he had one of those flash plays. So honestly, when it comes to Kai Jones, it's like you're in guess mode of like, is he going to figure it out and put it together on an every game basis? I don't know the answer to it, but I think when you look at his floor, you see a guy who runs the floor, he gets easy baskets, and somebody who could be switchable on defense.
I guess the reason I ask about him, and you also obviously have Isiah Jackson, slight Nick connection there with Kentucky and CAA. He got the double dip.
Yeah.
And I guess if you want to throw Sengun, is that the way to pronounce it?
Sengun, yeah.
Sengun, okay. In there too. I have this like crazy theory that I've been like workshopping for myself about centers being like the way running backs are in football. Like,
yes, definitely.
Yeah. Is that, I just feel like there's some logic to like, okay, we could pay this guy $10 million or $11 million or $12 million for the next 4 years, and he could probably be pretty serviceable for us to play 25 minutes a night within a season. Do you think teams are thinking that way at all?
The Knicks just signed Nerlens Noel for what, $5 million for 1 year? Like, I mean, it's there's definitely more. These guys like a Tre Mann is just a lot sexier of a draft pick than Kai Jones. Although Kai Jones could go earlier, but in my mind, like I'd rather gamble on Mann than get a dunker.
Okay.
Who in 3 years may suddenly be shooting threes and attacking closeouts,
all right,
and stuff like that. But yeah, when you see like what the Knicks did with Noel, it just, they're just so much easier to get a big guy like that. Very
fair. Okay, I'm going to limit myself to asking about 3 more players. One, a guy I've had a fascination with, Keon Johnson. I felt like he was 6, 7, 8 in like throughout the year, and now in your latest mock, again, I don't know that anybody fell more relative to like where they were at one point than Keon. What's going on? Because he, to me, strikes me as a guy like shit. If he figures out the offense, that's the guy you want.
Yeah, he could still go, 7 to 15. His range is right there, and me moving him down has a lot to do with other guys moving up, and naturally somebody has to drop. And just conversation with a couple guys lately who are just like, he's such a great athlete, but I don't know if he knows how to play basketball. And so
it's a problem.
It's another guy who you take him and he's not going to produce much, in the first couple of years. And some teams may be fine with that.
Okay.
But others may have more pressure on them. GMs may have more pressure to get some results. Like in the half court, he's not a creator and he's not a shooter. So, kind of like I would say Patrick Williams and Isaac Okoro last year. You saw the flashes, and he'll give you flashes this year, but you really got to hope that he puts it all together over the next couple of years. And also he's such a good athlete, but he graded in the 17th percentile in transition. Like he doesn't always know how to use his athleticism.
Okay.
So there's just a lot of questions with that and his skill level for a wing player. And for a wing player who you're thinking about top 10, I think you wish he was a little further along. I've also heard scouts a little disappointed by the fact he measured like 6'3.5" in size.
I was about to say, like you can't. Like he gets described as a wing, which obviously he is a wing, but he's like shooting guard size, like pretty strictly. So
yeah. He's got to be. He's not really a ball handler at all. He was one of the worst pick and roll ball handlers in the league. 6 of 23 out of pick and roll situations this year in terms of getting his own shot, and he's just not a guy you put on the ball. Not at this point, at least.
A guy who's going in the opposite direction. I think you have him. Do you have him going to the Knicks? I think you have him going to the Knicks. Yes, Mr. Murphy, Trey Murphy III out of Virginia. Does it worry you when you see a guy or maybe I should ask, well, why is it that you could have a guy like this who is pretty much a second? I mean, I think he was mocked in the second round pretty much the whole year. And now all of a sudden he's like, oh shit, this guy's going to be a pick in the teens. Like what's the deal with Murphy?
Yeah, I think, he's got this role at Virginia, which is a very simplified role. It's pretty much catch and shoot. And I think when we're talking about, mid-first round value, teams want shooters and teams want defenders. And he's a high character guy and the numbers back it up. And he's probably showing he could do a little more than what he was able to show at Virginia. Like I'm sure they're running him through, off the dribble drills and workouts. And he really didn't do much off the dribble work at Virginia. I'm also told, and I start to confirm this, that him and Duarte just got called back for second workouts with Golden State. So
who has the 14th pick?
Murphy is hot. Everybody wants, I always say they're in the draft, like interest is contagious and it snowballs. And like you hear teams, you hear a lot of buzz about Murphy and then more teams want to find out more. Like, what am I missing? Let's bring him in.
Okay.
Same thing with Duarte. Those guys are rising. At this point, I put that mock out yesterday morning, and at this point, I'd be shocked if Murphy is on the board for the Knicks at 19.
Wow.
And Duarte at this point, from what I'm told, and I haven't been told by the specific team, but I don't think he makes it past Washington at 15.
Wow. Okay. Shit, that's interesting. Last guy I want to ask about before I let you go is Jaden Springer, just because, again, I think you've written this in the past for Bleacher Report, and I think you mentioned it more recently. The range on him seems to be very all over the place. I tried to watch a decent amount of Tennessee last year, and I was waiting for like pop moments from him, and he didn't really give you those pop moments.
Yep.
Do you think that's why he's fallen from like a potential top 10 pick to a guy who is probably going to go much later?
Well, I will say most of the year, I guess draft Twitter, and I guess that's a real thing, was higher on Springer than the NBA.
Okay.
Most of the year I've heard like fringe first rounder. So I think the narrative was kind of off. If anyone thought that he was at least by NBA thoughts that he was a lottery guy. But yeah, like you said, he doesn't always pop off the screen. And from what I'm hearing workouts, he's now fully healthy. His ankle, which knocked him out a couple games, I'm told it limited him throughout the season. And then he showed up to the combine, had the 5th highest standing vert and the 6th highest max vertical, 41.5 inches. And to me, I think Springer is a lottery guy as long as you can be patient. And
okay,
I think D'Anthony Melton is the comparison I've heard and I've used. Not a star player, but a guy who has a chance to be a star role player just by, playing opportunistically, making the right decisions on and off the ball. Good spot up shooter, very strong playing through contact, very good defender at both backcourt spots, and one of the youngest kids to draft. And I think scouts have also talked about they hate how he was used at Tennessee. Like he was never put in ball screen situations. He didn't have that many opportunities to create, and so. People are all over the place on him. He didn't get that green room invite. I'm guessing he's going to be available when the Knicks pick.
Okay.
Is he the right pick for the Knicks? I like him in a vacuum. I don't know if he's the right pick for the Knicks because I think they need someone to put a little more pressure on the rim. But he's a very fundamentally sound, well-rounded player.
All right, Jonathan Wasserman, before I let you go, I'm giving you my $1, but you must wager it on one player that will be wearing a Knicks hat by the end of Thursday night. Any player, you had 3 picks to work with, so you could really go a number of directions here.
Man, I'm going to go with, I think they're going to go out of their way to get Trey Murphy.
You really? Oh, I predicted that today.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I wrote that in my newsletter that if I had to put a buck on it right now, it'd be go up and get Murphy.
He's the hot guy. I don't know if the Knicks are going to lose their, Burks and Bullock. I'm not really sure what's happening with them, but he's the hot guy right now. He shoots, he defends. He's a really high character guy. I could just see them very interested in him. And and as I think you reported that he worked out for them, right?
Yeah, him and
Trey. Right?
Who was it? Yeah, him and Trey. That was probably a fun workout to watch.
Yeah.
And Bassie. Is Bassie going to get drafted?
He will. I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks gave him a look at 32.
Really?
I've talked to scouts who think he's going to get first round looks.
Holy shit.
I think he's better than I don't know where he's going to go. He could go anywhere, but I think he's pretty good. He's big time athlete, monster wingspan. And I think
he's 2-time defensive player of the year. I mean, it's Conference USA, but still it's something.
He's far more skilled than Mitch. He's obviously not the athlete that Mitch is, and not as mobile around the perimeter. But if they're looking for a center who can block shots but give you a little offense, Bassie's an interesting option at 32.
Oh, look at that. A little bonus tidbit here. Jonathan Wasserman, before I let you go, can you let folks at home know where they could find you and your stuff?
Yeah, Bleacher Report, NBA Draft Was on Twitter. We'll have content out every day next week. And I'll be on the NBA TV mock draft show Tuesday night. So you could check that out.
Folks, you're going to want to go to your Twitter. And I didn't just do this. I always have your notifications. There's a little bell there. Do you see the little bell? You're going to push the little bell for Jonathan Wasserman. You're allowed to turn it off after Thursday night. I personally keep it on all year. You're one of my go-to. You are my go-to for all things draft.
Thanks, buddy.